Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into a part of history your textbooks politely tiptoed around. You're walking the cobbled alleys of ancient Rome. The air smells like heat and stone, with a faint tang of something you can't quite place. A man in a linen tunic squats beside a wooden stall, swishing something yellow and suspicious in his mouth, and you realize he's brushing his teeth with urine. You probably won't survive this timeline with your modern hygiene standards intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time you're listening. It's always fun seeing who else is drifting off with weird history around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle past a fountain shaped like a lion spitting water into a marble bowl. Someone's thrown some olives in there. Not coins. Just olives. You're in ancient Rome, and your mouth feels fuzzy. Which is unfortunate, because dental care here is not exactly Colgate-sponsored. Here's what they believed. Urine, specifically, aged human urine, could whiten your teeth. Why? Because it contains ammonia, a natural cleaning agent. Yep, the very same compound you'll find in some modern cleaners. Of course, your inner voice is screaming please no, but a Roman wouldn't blink. This was common knowledge. They'd store it in pots, let it ferment, and then rinse with it. Portuguese urine, in particular, was considered top tier. Like the Evian of oral care. You try to imagine it, a sun-warmed amphora of peat waiting on your sink. But this wasn't just the practice of the poor. Even wealthy elites joined in, hoping for brighter smiles, probably with fewer friends. Historians still argue whether this was a status symbol or just blind belief in chemical magic. One inscription from Pompeii reads something akin to "May your smile be as bright as Saturn's belt," which might have just meant "don't rot like my cousin's gums." Not everyone was on board. Satirical poems mocked those with urine breath, and some believed tooth stains were signs of character, like battle scars for your face. One fringe belief held that letting your teeth decay naturally made you more humble before the gods. Imagine using cavities as virtue signaling. Still, if you were serious about your smile, you might pair the urine with ground pumice or crushed bones. Mix, stir, gargle. It's the kind of thing that makes a modern dentist wake up in a cold sweat. Roman poet Catullus even penned a line mocking a rival with, "Your teeth are so white, you must gargle Spanish piss." Harsh words, but probably true. Imagine dropping that line in a rap battle today. There was no escaping the dental dogma, though. Temples had offerings for toothaches, and certain gods were called upon to protect molars. The goddess Bona Dea was rumored to be fond of well-brushed devotees. With what? Yep, the pee thing again. You can't help but wonder, did it actually work? Surprisingly, yes. Ammonia does clean and whiten. Even modern chemists reluctantly nod at the Roman technique, though they strongly recommend you don't try it. Unless you're going for the full vintage Roman cosplay, in which case, please stay 6 feet away. But the thing is, Rome didn't just tolerate this. They taxed it. Emperor Vespasian, in a moment of pure fiscal brilliance, placed a levy on public urinals. When his son mocked the idea, he held up a coin and said, "Money doesn't stink." Imagine defending your dad's pee tax in front of your friends. Family dinners were probably intense. So here you are, standing in the shadow of the Colosseum, mouth full of warm history. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And strangely human. Because across time and empires, we've always wanted to look good, even if it meant rinsing with last week's bathroom. Your thoughts wander, as they do when sleep begins to pull at your edges. You picture a proud Roman, tilting his head back, gargling like a champ, grinning yellow to white under the Mediterranean sun. Maybe he's off to flirt, to speak in the Senate, or to brawl in the streets. But his breath? Questionable at best. And you? You pull your toga tight, step over a curious dog chewing someone's sandal, and wonder what other questionable habits you'll discover before this night's over. You keep walking, slowly now, through a narrow alley where the limestone walls rise high on either side. Somewhere ahead, you hear water trickling and muffled voices echoing with the exaggerated laughter of men who've clearly spent too long seated side by side. You round a corner and there it is, one of Rome's famous public latrines. Picture it, not stalls with doors or any kind of privacy. Just a long stone bench with keyhole-shaped openings, side by side, no dividers. And beneath that bench, a flowing channel of water, trying its best to keep up with the parade of Roman digestion. You hesitate. There are about a dozen men already there, robes hoisted, chatting casually like it's a cocktail party. One man gestures with a sponge on a stick, the tersorium, as if making a point. You realize with growing horror that it's not just a prop. That's what they're all using. A shared cleaning tool. A communal backside brush. Dipped in vinegar or salty water between uses if you're lucky. If you're not, well, we don't talk about that. You find yourself shuffling closer, compelled and repulsed, watching as a man finishes his business, dunks the tersorium in a small trough at his feet, gives it a quick swirl, and sets it back for the next guy. Historians still argue whether this was hygienic genius or a bacterial nightmare. Some insist vinegar neutralized enough germs to prevent major outbreaks, while others point out Rome's frequent plagues and intestinal complaints might suggest otherwise. Modern microbiologists scream internally. The design was practical, at least. The flowing water beneath wasn't just for waste, it was meant to rinse the sponge trough too. In theory. Of course, if the upstream guy had issues, well, so did everyone downstream. You sit on the cool stone edge, not daring to participate but letting the scene wash over you. The smell, mercifully dulled by incense from a nearby temple, still tickles your nose. There's an earthy tang of sweat, damp wool, vinegar, and something that can only be described as ancient. You overhear a bit of gossip. A baker's apprentice owes a senator's wife money. A gladiator was spotted buying honeyed dates for someone not his wife. And someone's tersorium broke mid-wipe, clearly the day's most tragic tale. Rome's latrines weren't just for business. They were social hubs. Men exchanged news, insults, even poetry while their bowels did what bowels do. Some scholars suggest political deals were cut right there, cheeks on stone, tersorium in hand. Imagine proposing a new law mid-squat. Democracy truly at ground level. The wealthier Romans avoided these public spaces when possible, of course. They had chamber pots at home. But even the upper class sometimes had to visit the latrine if they were out in the city. No matter your status, when nature called, you lined up like everyone else, unless you had a personal slave to handle the details. Yes, some literally brought someone to do the wiping for them. That's a level of luxury few aspire to today. But not all used the tersorium. Some carried their own cloths, or handfuls of moss, or even small pebbles. One surviving tablet from the Vindolanda fort mentions 3 smooth stones for the bath and post-meal relief. There's no emoji for that. You shift in place, suddenly aware of the stone texture beneath you. Your dream body reacts to the scene, caught between sleepy awe and mild hygienic panic. And just as your mind begins to drift, you catch a glint of something, an ancient graffiti carved into the wall. I have come here to relieve myself, and found only trouble. A Roman Yelp review, maybe. Beyond the humor, though, is something deeply human. Even in the heart of empire, with gods and generals and marble statues, people had to go. And they did so together, with sticks and vinegar in too much eye contact. Because cleanliness, in ancient Rome, was communal. Intimate. Utterly unfiltered. Your eyelids feel heavier as the murmurs of the latrine fade behind you. You walk away slowly, stepping past a slave boy carrying a basket of used sponges bound for rinsing. He nods at you with the tired expression of someone who has seen things, worse than war, some might argue. You turn the corner into another alley, nostrils flaring slightly, wondering if the next stop on this journey will be better, or somehow worse. And deep down, you know the answer is probably both. The alley grows quieter as you walk, your sandals scraping soft dust from the uneven stones. The sun hangs low, casting golden light through rooftop beams and laundry lines, until you reach the edge of a bustling square. There, standing proud and sweaty in the center, is a crowd of men and women swarming around a small wooden cart. On the cart, vials, jars, bits of cloth, and, wait, is that a piece of scraped skin? You ease forward, curious. A woman reaches into her purse and offers a few coins to the vendor, who hands her a small clay pot. She opens it, sniffs, then smears it on her face with a satisfied smile. What's in the jar, you wonder? A sweet oil? Crushed flowers? Nope. It's gladiator sweat. You heard right. In ancient Rome, the fluids of gladiators, especially their sweat and even their blood, were believed to have magical and medicinal properties. Women, particularly, believed that the perspiration of these ironclad athletes could enhance their beauty, remove blemishes, and infuse them with vitality. After all, these men were admired, feared, and mythologized. If their bodies were strong, surely what came from them was powerful too. It wasn't uncommon for vendors outside the Colosseum to collect the sweat of defeated, or dead, gladiators with a curved tool known as a strigil, usually meant for oil scraping after a bath. They gather whatever dripped or clung to skin and armor, then mix it into ointments or potions. One Roman recipe included the fat of a she-goat and the sweat of a Thracian. Historians still argue whether this was purely belief-based medicine or if it had roots in early pharmacology, but let's be honest, there are probably safer moisturizers out there. The blood, too, had its market. It was thought to cure epilepsy, especially fresh and still warm. Some swore by it. Others quietly gagged. Fringe healers even claimed it could cure infertility if mixed with crushed pearls and honey, though that would certainly have other side effects, like financial ruin. You walk past a woman with perfectly curled hair and suspiciously glowing cheeks. She's holding a small vial close to her chest. You want to ask her if it works, but decide it's probably better not to know. This obsession with gladiator excretions wasn't limited to the beauty world. Some people believed that even wearing a scrap of bloody tunic or sleeping under a shield used in battle could transfer bravery or virility. To the Roman mind, physical essence was power, and power could be absorbed. It's like their version of protein shakes, if your protein came with a side of internal screaming. Of course, the gladiators themselves rarely consented to this. Many were slaves or prisoners of war, their bodies exploited in life and, disturbingly, in death. Imagine dying heroically in the arena, only for your final legacy to be someone bottling your armpit residue. Not exactly the funeral Virgil would have penned. But society bought into the myth wholesale. Philosophers gave lectures on the transference of bodily energies. Poets wrote verses comparing gladiator blood to wine. Even the Empress Faustina was rumored to have developed a fondness for one particular fighter, not just romantically, but cosmetically. One court rumor claimed she used his sweat as a facial serum. Whether true or not, it made for excellent gossip around the aqueduct. You look up now at the edge of the Colosseum, its shadow stretching like the memory of 1,000 dusty cheers. You imagine the echo of metal on metal, the crowd roaring, and beneath it all, the quiet industry of vendors with little vials, catching drops no one else would want. Not for medicine. Not for fame. Just to smear onto cheeks in hope of youth or protection. It's absurd. And it's very human. A soft breeze rolls in, carrying hints of frankincense and something slightly more pungent. You wrinkle your nose, but smile anyway. This is Rome, equal parts grandeur and grime. You turn toward a small alley that leads away from the crowd, stepping carefully around a puddle of something best left undefined. Before you go, you catch one last glimpse of the vendor smiling at his next customer, holding out a tiny jar like it holds stardust. Maybe it does. Or maybe it's just sweat in a world that believed in miracles. You slip into the quieter alley, letting the crowd's noise melt behind you. The stone walls grow cool in the narrowing shadows, and somewhere above, a pigeon coos like it's sharing an ancient secret. Your feet lead you toward a small doorway nestled into the wall, an open archway where the scent of burnt herbs, goat tallow, and something oddly mendy wafts into the evening air. Inside, the chamber is dim and cluttered. Shelves bow under the weight of ceramic jars, folded cloth, and wooden tools shaped like spoons, hooks, and tiny shovels. A woman in a simple wool dress is grinding something with a mortar and pestle. She doesn't look up, just grunts as she adds a powder that smells faintly of fire and rock. That, dear dream traveler, is pumice. Volcanic stone, ground to a fine grit, and used by ancient Romans as a key ingredient in toothpaste. Yes, the same stuff you might use today to scrub your feet, they cheerfully smeared all over their teeth. You settle on a stool near the wall, watching her work. She mixes the pumice with a thick white paste, probably pickled goat fat or resin, adding a splash of vinegar and a few shavings of dried mint leaf. This was the standard dental blend for the wealthier class, abrasive, acidic, and utterly unappetizing. But if you were serious about oral hygiene in the empire, you needed your paste gritty enough to fight whatever had nestled between your teeth since the last roasted boar. Poorer Romans had their own blends. Crushed bones, ash, even charcoal. One popular recipe included crushed mouse skulls. Why? Well, rodents never stopped gnawing, so their teeth must have been strong, flawless logic, if you ignore literally everything else. Historians still argue whether these pastes helped or harmed. Some evidence shows reduced decay thanks to the abrasive agents, but other remains reveal eroded enamel and cracked molars, especially among upper-class women who scrub daily. Whitening, yes. Longevity, maybe not. You hear the woman mutter a small chant. Not a prayer exactly, more of a kitchen rhyme. Pumice bites and vinegar sings, cleanse the mouth from devil things. It's charming, in a vaguely terrifying way. Romans often believed bad breath came from internal rot or moral decay. Clean teeth, clean soul. In some corners of the empire, people burned herbs and inhaled the smoke as part of oral purification rituals. Lavender, sage, and rosemary were popular, anything fragrant enough to smother the halitosis of a diet rich in garlic, anchovy paste, and fermented fish sauce. Yum! The woman offers a wooden scoop of the mixture to a customer, a portly man with wine-purple robes and a mouth like a collapsed aqueduct. He sniffs, nods, and begins applying it right there, using a thin strip of cloth to rub the paste into his gums. You wince as the pumice crunches faintly under pressure. No toothbrushes, no gentle bristles. Just cloth, grit, and resolve. Nearby, a child gnaws on a dried fig and points to a jar labeled lupus jaw powder. The shopkeeper shakes her head sternly and covers the label. You blink. Was that werewolf teeth? Likely a folk cure, or a scam. Either way, it made the shelf look exotic. Dental care in Rome, like everything else, was a mix of practical science, wishful thinking, and complete nonsense. One fringe theory claimed humming while brushing summoned tooth-protecting spirits. Another swore by rubbing rabbit brain on aching gums. The line between medicine and myth was as thin as a hair, and probably coated in some form of oil. You take in the scene. The low light, the clink of tools, the sour-sweet smell of pickled fat and ground mint. It's oddly calming, watching these ancient rituals unfold. There's something sincere about it. They didn't know germ theory or plaque buildup. They just wanted to smile without shame. Outside, the sky deepens. A chorus of crickets starts up in the distance. The man with the purple robe finishes his scrub, spits into a corner urn, and walks out with the self-satisfied swagger of a man who thinks his teeth now rival the gods. You linger a moment longer. The shopkeeper hums as she grinds another batch, her rhythm steady and unbothered. Maybe she knows something modern dentists don't. Or maybe she's just good at hiding the smell. You step back into the street, mouth tasting faintly of crushed mint and imaginary mouse skulls, wondering how far we've really come. You're moving again, back into the Roman streets, guided now by instinct and that nagging curiosity that's stronger than any common sense. The light has shifted into the soft bronze of twilight, and you can hear distant laughter, clattering hooves, and the gentle splash of water from a nearby fountain shaped like Neptune spitting into a chipped marble bowl. You pass a couple leaning close, too close, whispering something that makes the man chuckle and the woman sweat his shoulder. And then, you smell it. No, not romance. It's a curious mix of herbs, fermented fish, stale wine, and what might be old leather. But layered under it all is something sharp, tangy, almost ammonia-like. The unmistakable perfume of bad breath. Welcome to the underbelly of Roman oral health, halitosis horribilis. See, despite all that urine rinsing and pumice scrubbing, Romans had a problem they couldn't entirely solve: breath. That slow, creeping odor that wafts out during a senatorial speech or across the dining couch at a banquet, flattening the mood faster than a bad vintage. And yes, they noticed. There are entire poems and invectives written about breath like a sewer or mouths fouler than the Tiber in August. You wander past a spice stall now, where vendors offer little sachets of myrrh, cloves, and cinnamon. Chewing these was one of the empire's most popular remedies. Think of it as ancient gum, though instead of fresh minty coolness, you're crunching through bark and resin. It worked, sometimes. Depending on the seller's recipe and the buyer's budget. You pick one up. A small packet of dried mint bound in papyrus, labeled in charcoal, Pro Doribus Mortis Oris, for the breath of death. It's a gift pack, probably sold to husbands before date night. Historians still argue whether chronic halitosis was more common back then due to diet, dental care, or just the lack of floss. But based on surviving texts, it was clearly a recurring punchline and a real source of shame. Roman writer Martial once mocked someone's mouth so foul, "Your words rot before they reach my ears." Romans turned to every method they could. Mouth rinses made of vinegar, wine, or even goat's milk infused with crushed fennel. One bizarre French cure involved gargling with boiled leeks and rainwater collected on Venus's birthday. Another called for sucking on smooth river stones, blessed by a priest, of course. You spot a man ahead, fumbling with a vial as he lifts his head and pours a pale liquid into his mouth. No doubt another rinse. Maybe imported Portuguese urine again, because yes, they didn't just brush with it, they also swished. It was one of the more effective cleansers, to be fair. The ammonia helped neutralize odor, just as it does in modern industrial products. Though you'd be forgiven for thinking smelling like cleaning solution isn't quite the flex they thought it was. Still, status played a big role. Rich Romans had more access to fine rinses, exotic spices, and physicians who claimed to mix mouth-freshening tonics from Egyptian salt and Syrian honey. The poor? They made do. A handful of sage leaves, or, if they were lucky, chewed on mastic gum, a resin from trees near the Mediterranean. It was sticky, fragrant, and, unlike the communal tersorium, actually a decent idea. There was even a belief that rubbing garlic on your teeth could remove odors. Garlic. On your teeth. To remove odor. You stare at a stand selling roasted garlic bulbs and try not to weep softly into your toga. You pass a public fountain now, where a pair of young men are arguing over whether their uncle's breath caused a wine to turn sour. One insists it's coincidence. The other swears it's divine punishment for eating spoiled shellfish. Neither seems convinced. You keep moving. There's a sense here that oral care wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about charisma. Romans believed that bad breath could hinder your success. A stench too strong could cost you lovers, friends, even court cases. Imagine being on trial and the judge recoils from your testimony, literally. Some orators were known to suck on licorice root before speeches, just to keep the Senate from falling asleep or fainting. And yet, despite all their efforts, some mouths just never got better. In those cases, people relied on distraction, overpowering perfumes, incense burned indoors, or holding a flower to the nose while talking, politely passive-aggressive. One surviving mosaic even shows a man with a handkerchief held permanently to his face, possibly the world's first breath barrier. You step into a shaded courtyard now. A young woman walks by with a satchel of herbs tucked into her neckline, smiling politely but never opening her mouth. You nod in respect. That's strategy. And you? Your own breath feels just fine, thank you. No goat milk, no resin. Just the cool night air and the whispering hush of history. The night deepens as you wander further into the city, the last rays of sunlight giving way to oil lamps flickering from terracotta sconces on brick walls. The streets empty a little, and the pace slows. You follow the sound of a mule cart creaking down a side street, and then pause. A man in a pale tunic is unloading something unusual, amphory with sealed tops and straw padding. You lean in and catch a whiff. Urine. Yes, again. But this time it's not for scrubbing teeth or swishing away bad breath. These jars are part of a more specialized trade, imported urine, mostly from Portugal, used in laundries and personal hygiene rituals. But first, let's revisit the oral angle. You already know Romans brushed with urine. But swishing it like mouthwash? That wasn't just done. It was recommended. Especially if it had been aged just right, to let the urea break down into ammonia and other sharp-smelling, enamel-blasting compounds. Fresh urine? Too tame. You needed the good stuff, the vintage. You can almost hear a Roman housewife, only year-old Portuguese, none of that backyard junk. And no, that's not a joke. The urine of foreigners, especially from northern Iberia, was considered purer and more potent. They even had dedicated collection systems. Clay pots placed in street corners where men would, with surprising civic pride, relieve themselves. These pots, called philonici, were collected and sent off to laundries or sold to individuals seeking that perfect rinse. The government got involved too. Remember Emperor Vespasian? His famous pea tax extended to mouthwash sales, too. That's right, taxation on urination. Historians still argue whether this obsession with foreign urine was based on genuine cleaning power or simply cultural snobbery. Either way, someone made a fortune bottling me. You step into the shadow of a phalonica, an ancient Roman laundromat. Inside, you see stone basins where workers, mostly slaves, stand ankle-deep in urine, stomping stained tunics with their bare feet. The ammonia lifts dirt, loosens grease, and bleaches fabric. It's effective, if profoundly unpleasant. But here's the twist, some of that same laundry-grade urine was siphoned off for dental use. The overlap between hygiene and industry in Rome was disturbingly efficient. If it could clean a tunic, it could clean your teeth. Maybe. As you watch, a laundress carefully pours a jar into a smaller clay vial. It's labeled with scratchy Latin letters, Pro Denibus Candidus, for bright teeth. It's destined for a wealthier client. Not everyone could afford to swish with the finest Iberian batch. Most Romans made do with local supply or skipped the ritual altogether. Of course, not everyone thought it worked. Satirical writers mocked the practice, and some physicians of the time suggested that excessive use of ammonia led to weakened gums and cracked enamel. But others swore by it. In fact, some claimed that the act of swishing with such an intensely odorous fluid forced one to be more mindful, more pious even. If you can suffer through this, one philosopher wrote, you are already halfway to virtue. There were mouthwash alternatives, thankfully. One popular formula mixed honey, salt, and vinegar, like salad dressing for your molars. Others involved egg whites, rose oil, and even powdered coral. But they lacked the punch of the ammonia rinse. And don't think this was limited to Rome. Archaeological records from Britain and Gaul show similar containers near temples and bathhouses, suggesting that this pungent ritual had spread across the empire. Urine united the provinces. In a way, you find yourself at the edge of a market square now, where a man hawks little amphora-shaped flasks with painted labels. One shows a happy mouth with rays of light shooting from the teeth. Another reads for wedding days in looping Latin script. These are gift sets, high-end appearances for big events. A young couple walks by, laughing. The groom carries one of the flasks proudly, as if it contains perfume instead of fermented body waste. His bride waves to the crowd, and you can't help but smile at the absurd romance of it all. You sit on a low stone step, watching the glow of lamplight ripple across the square. The air smells faintly of oil, smoke, and a subtle ammonia note you're beginning to ignore. In Rome, nothing goes to waste, not even your own fluids. And here, in the quiet corners of the Eternal City, someone is always rinsing, always scrubbing, always preparing for that moment when their smile must outshine their words. You close your eyes, and for a moment, your mouth feels just a little cleaner. The hour creeps later, and the city's pulse softens. You walk now along a quieter avenue, the marble facades glowing faintly under oil lamp halos. Everything is slower, voices lower, footsteps measured, shadows stretching long and soft. But ahead, something gleams. A doorway left ajar. Inside, a flickering torch reveals a strange collection of metal tools, laid out in neat rows on a low wooden bench. You step in slowly. This is no barbershop or perfumer's stall. This is a Roman medicus dentarius, a practitioner of what we might hesitantly call ancient dentistry. And the tools? They're terrifying. There's a small iron chisel, stained with something brownish. A curved hook with a handle worn smooth from use. And something that looks suspiciously like a pair of pliers, but with jagged teeth and no intention of mercy. This is where Romans came when pumice and prayers failed. When their gums oozed, or their teeth cracked, or the throbbing in their jaw drove them to madness. You can practically hear the muffled groans of patients pass. There's no anesthetic, no numbing gel, just willpower, maybe a good swig of wine, and someone to hold you still. You glance at a clay tablet mounted on the wall. A simple line drawing shows a man reclining, mouth open in agony, while another figure holds a tool to his jaw and a second figure, perhaps a servant, pins his arms down. The caption beneath? Better to lose a tooth than your life. Comforting. Most Roman dental tools were made from bronze or iron. They were built to probe, scrape, yank, and sometimes cauterize. And they were shared, cleaned only with boiling water, vinegar, or, yes, again, urine. Germ theory wouldn't arrive for over a millennium, and infections were just an accepted risk. Historians still argue whether these tools were used primarily by physicians or barbers. In some towns, barbershops doubled as minor surgical stations. You could walk in for a trim and end up leaving with one less molar. 2 services, 1 chair. Efficient. And the techniques? Barbaric by modern standards. If you had a rotting tooth, the standard treatment was extraction, simple and brutal. The dentist would clamp, twist, and pull. If the tooth broke mid-procedure, which it often did, they'd go in again with sharp hooks to fish out the roots. There was no such thing as precision. One particularly infamous method involved wedging the tooth with a metal spike and tapping it with a mallet to loosen it. Tap too hard and, well, You might be back for jaw surgery next week. Assuming you survived the abscess. You look at a set of polished bone tweezers resting near a small ceramic cup filled with something dark and sticky, likely resin, used to seal a socket or coat an exposed nerve. If that didn't help, there were poultices, a mix of herbs, mashed figs, and sometimes even powdered lead, which, unsurprisingly, caused more problems than it solved. A fringe treatment involved placing a live beetle into the mouth to distract the spirit of pain. Let's just say that didn't catch on. And yet, despite all this horror, some Romans maintained decent oral health. Their diet, lower in processed sugars, helped. So did their dedication to regular cleaning, even if it meant scraping with sticks and rinsing with ancient horrors. You imagine a Roman senator pacing his marble atrium, hand pressed to his cheek, muttering curses at Jupiter while trying to decide which practitioner hurt less. Word of mouth was everything. Some healers were trusted. Others were known to remove the wrong tooth. Or all of them. The most respected dental workers developed reputations for quick hands and steady aim. Some even kept written testimonials, etched onto clay tiles and hung proudly by their doors. Removed 3 teeth in under a minute, very little screaming. A badge of honor. You spot a curious item tucked into a woven basket, a necklace strung with small teeth, each one drilled through the root. Maybe it's a trophy from grateful clients. Maybe it's a warning. You back away quietly, letting the cool night air touch your face again. Your own jaw throbs in sympathy. Behind you, the medicus hums softly, sharpening something with far too much enthusiasm. And as you slip once more into the streets, you whisper a quiet thanks to your modern dentist. Even if they do scold you for not flossing, at least they don't come at you with a chisel and a mallet. You wander through the streets, brushing fingertips along rough brick walls as your mind churns over the tools from that last stop, the hooks, the hammers, the crude courage of it all. And now, your feet take you into a part of the city that hums with a different kind of tension. There's no screaming here, no tooth yanking or pliers soaked in vinegar. This is quieter, more philosophical. Still strange. Still Roman. A portico opens into a small public courtyard lined with benches and well-dressed men reclining in togas. They're not here to clean anything, but they're talking about it. 2 senators debate with surprising intensity whether poor dental hygiene should be punishable by fines in the forum. Another recites a passage from Cato the Elder, something about a man's breath being a reflection of his soul. You sit nearby and eavesdrop as the conversation flows from cleanliness to law, from bathhouses to politics, from mouths to morality. Because in Rome, everything eventually came back to the empire. And yes, even dental hygiene. You learn that class deeply impacted who had access to proper oral care. The patricians had private baths, imported rinses, and slaves trained to pluck bits of meat from their master's teeth after feasts. The plebeians? They had cloth strips, stale vinegar, and prayers. If a poor man smelled like decay, it was just nature. If a nobleman did, it was scandal. But there was more to it than wealth. Oral health had legal consequences, too. In some provinces, merchants were fined for having unsanitary breath if it disrupted transactions. One infamous case involved a fishmonger whose exhale caused a senator to faint into a crate of eels. The Senate debated for 3 days whether it was assault. You scoff, softly. But really, historians still argue whether Roman attitudes toward oral hygiene were about vanity or health, or control. Laws regulating smell and appearance were often just ways to enforce hierarchy. Bad teeth meant bad morals meant lower status. It was a self-fulfilling cycle, unless you had the means to buy your way out. You pass a graffiti-covered wall and notice something odd. Among the usual drawings of phallic symbols and crude poetry, there's a detailed sketch of a tooth with roots and all. Next to it, in sloppy Latin, the words rotten within, like senators' promises. Political satire via dental metaphor. You can't help but grin. In the distance, you hear the clatter of wooden sandals on stone. A small group of children run by, laughing and chewing on what look like dried licorice sticks. You squint. They're not candy. They're salvianum, sweet herb chews meant to protect young teeth and teach good habits. Parents used to press them into tiny hands as a bedtime ritual. Brush? No. Bite? Always. Nearby, a vendor sets up a display of toothpicks made from silver, bronze, and even ivory. They're laid up beside mirrors and perfumes. The wealthy carried them as status symbols, dangling from chains like modern jewelry. A golden toothpick told the world you cared deeply about hygiene and deeply less about moderation. But even the best tools couldn't stop the slow rot that plagued Roman mouths. Plaque was misunderstood. Gum disease unnamed. Cavities explained by demons or imbalance of bodily humors. If your mouth ached, you didn't seek fluoride, you sought a priest. Or an exorcist. You stepped past a small shrine where offerings lie at the feet of a lesser-known deity, Candidus dens, the white-toothed spirit invoked by desperate sufferers. Grapes, a bronze mirror, a carved wooden tooth. The air smells faintly of smoke and dried rosemary. And so it went. The mouth wasn't just where Romans ate, it was where they spoke laws, prayed, insulted enemies, made love, and delivered victory speeches. To let it rot was to risk more than a smile. It was a matter of class, power, and pride. You lean against a marble column now, gazing at the skyline pricked with torchlight. Somewhere, a man is whispering sweet nothings, hoping his rinse worked. Somewhere else, a merchant covers his mouth while speaking, just in case. And beneath it all, Rome pulses, a city obsessed with appearances, even if it meant scrubbing your teeth with ash and cow bile. The politics of plaque are stranger than fiction. The soundscape changes as you continue along the sloping path of uneven flagstones. The distant chatter fades. Laughter gives way to scraping, and somewhere ahead, you hear the rhythm of a razor gliding across skin. You're approaching one of Rome's most frequented yet least glamorous institutions, the barbershop. Now don't picture the cheery striped poles or friendly buzz of electric trimmers. No, this is raw, ancient practicality, a cramped stone room with open air on one side and an overwhelming scent of sweat, oil, copper, and, faintly, blood. You step inside and are immediately enveloped in the murmur of idle complaints and the scrape-snip splash of men being sheared. It's a social ritual. A civic duty. But also, oddly, a kind of medical visit. Because Roman barbers, tonsors, did more than cut hair and trim beards. They treated boils. They lanced abscesses. They even removed teeth. And yes, they specialized in bloodletting. Over in the corner, a man leans back in a wooden chair, neck exposed, eyes half closed, as the tonsor draws a blade along his jaw. You watch the barber flick foam made of olive oil and goat milk away with one swift movement. Then he turns, dips the blade in a clay bowl, and retrieves something far more ominous, a long needle, followed by a copper bowl. The man has asked for a venisectio, a vein cutting, a Roman-style cleansing of the humors. Because to them, illness, mental or physical, was often blamed on an imbalance of the body's four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too tired? Too angry? Bleed it out. Historians still debate whether barbers or physicians primarily performed these rituals, but in working-class areas, barbers were often the only option. They were the everyman's healer, wielding razors instead of stethoscopes. You glance at a poster scratched into the wall, a cartoon of a man being bled while shouting, "Let my demons out." Below it, someone's added he's still sick. The barber in this shop is efficient. He ties a cord around the man's bicep, tightens it, and nicks the vein with the confidence of a man who's done this before breakfast. A thin line of blood trickles into the bowl. The patient grunts. A nearby onlooker raises his cup and says, "To balance." But it wasn't all bloodletting and blade work. Barbers also cleaned fingernails, scrubbed feet, and sometimes removed lice. A full-service experience, assuming you weren't squeamish. One ancient text praises a tonsor who could trim your beard, pluck your nose hairs, and cure a migraine, all in the same sitting. A real multitasker. You wander to a low table covered with the tools of the trade, a bronze razor, tweezers, tiny hooks for earwax removal, and a scoop labeled lingua razor, a tongue scraper. Yes, tongue hygiene mattered too. A clean tongue, they believed, purified speech and calmed the stomach. One particularly odd belief claimed that scraping your tongue before sunrise protected you from devil dreams. And then there's the floss. Or rather, what passed for it. Thin threads of silk or horsehair used to pick food from between teeth, sometimes dipped in vinegar or wine. Delicate? No. Effective? Debatable. One joke among soldiers was, floss with horsehair and you might still keep your tongue. This place is more than a grooming station. It's a gossip hub. A confessional. A low-rent therapist's couch. The man who just bled a pint leans forward now, eyes brighter, joking that he feels 20 years younger. His friends laugh, though one of them discreetly tightens his own belt, perhaps not so keen to join the ritual today. You step outside just as the next customer steps in, rolling up his sleeves with the practiced surrender of a man who knows what's coming. The barber welcomes him with a nod and the phrase pain is temporary. Cleanliness is Roman. You smile as the curtain of twilight deepens. There's something raw and admirable in this brutal efficiency. It wasn't about comfort. It was about function, survival, pride. And even if the tools looked like medieval torture devices and the cleanliness standards were subjective at best, this was Roman wellness. Hair neatly trimmed, beard oiled with myrrh, blood slightly reduced, breath hopefully tolerable. You roll your shoulders, imagining a city where self-care comes with a side of arterial spray and gentle humiliation. And honestly, it explains a lot about Roman stoicism. Night has fully claimed the city now. Lamps glow amber in alcoves, and your feet crunch gently over gravel sprinkled on marble floors. You follow the sounds of laughter and sloshing water until the walls open up to reveal one of Rome's most beloved sanctuaries, not a temple, but a thermae, a public bathhouse. Steam rolls out of its broad stone archways like warm breath, and the scent that hits you is a heady mix of olive oil, smoke, warm skin, and damp limestone. This isn't just where Romans got clean. This is where they lived, socially, politically, and sometimes literally. The bathhouse was a second home, a theater of gossip, body care, backstabbing, and, yes, strigil scraping. You walk through the vestibule, where sandals clatter and togas rustle, past the changing rooms where attendants, often slaves, fold and store tunics. You enter the tepidarium, the warm room. It's dim and flickering, with oil lamps hanging from hooks in the ceiling, casting orange halos over smooth stone walls. The men here sit in pairs or groups, reclining on marble ledges, murmuring softly about senators, racehorses, and who's been seen with whom. Someone chuckles. A slave boy pours water over a guest's shoulders from a large bronze jug. But your attention is pulled toward the rhythmic sound of scraping. It's everywhere. The unmistakable shake of the strigil, a curved bronze blade used to scrape oil, dirt, sweat, and dead skin from the body after a good soak or steam. Romans didn't bathe with soap. They'd rub themselves with oil, let it soak in, then scrape it all away. That sticky, grayish sludge? It was called smegma, yes, that's the ancient term, and some of it was actually bottled and sold. You watch as a burly man with a thick beard leans forward while a younger attendant scrapes his back. The curved blade glides from shoulder to hip in clean, satisfying swipes. The man sighs like a beast unburdened. You can almost feel the scrape yourself, ticklish, soothing, just this side of painful. And here's the kicker, some of this oily scrap, especially from athletes or soldiers, was collected and sold as a form of medicine or skin treatment. Just like gladiator sweat. It was believed to carry vitality, strength, even virility. Rubbing it into your own skin supposedly transferred the essence of discipline. Historians still argue whether this belief stemmed from spiritual traditions or pure desperation. You move into the caldarium next, the hot room. Steam thickens, the heat wrapping around your body like a damp toga. Men sit on stone benches near bubbling pools, cheeks flushed, hair soaked, exhaling slowly. Some dip cloths in cool water and place them on their chests. One man begins a whispered rant about a rival's foul-smelling strigil and how his last attendant was clearly undertrained. This room isn't just for sweating. It's where deals are made, secrets exchanged. Politicians sit beside fishmongers. Philosophers soak beside mercenaries. A stray sentence, overheard here, could change your future. A merchant, red-faced and glistening, just slipped someone a small coin beneath the water. You pretend not to see. The bathing ritual is intense. Oil in, oil out. Scrape. Sweat. Soak. Repeat. Then you cool off in the frigidarium, the cold room. A plunge pool awaits, ink dark and chilling. Men gasp as they lower themselves in, muscles twitching, breath caught. You consider joining but decide to keep your dream self dry, for now. And through it all, there is talk. Oh, the gossip. It flows as freely as the water. A senator's wife seen wearing her hair in a Greek style, scandalous. A poet who claims to brush his teeth with saffron and honey, impossible. A slave who supposedly saw Jupiter in the steam, concerning. And of course, there are insults. Light-hearted, but sharp. He smells like unwashed vinegar. His breath could tarnish silver. I've seen cleaner goats. One wall bears a scratched message. Do not speak of your enemies in steam. Steam listens. You pause, then realize it's probably advised to avoid being overheard by gossipers, not supernatural vapor spies. Probably. You lean against a warm stone column, letting your body relax as the haze clings to your skin. It's easy to imagine why the bathhouse was so beloved. It was equal parts hygiene and performance. You didn't just wash here, you displayed yourself. Your cleanliness, your body, your worth. It was wellness wrapped in ritual. Self-care with a political edge. No matter how grimy your day, you could enter filthy and emerge gleaming, scraped raw, and updated on every scandal in town. And when you step back into the night air, skin damp, ears buzzing, you feel changed. Like a real Roman, sweaty, social, and just a little slick with someone else's oil. Fresh from the bathhouse, the cool night air prickles against your still warm skin. You move with that odd looseness that comes only after steam, sweat, and an hour of being gently exfoliated by strangers. But there's no time to dwell. Around the corner, something curious is happening. A household courtyard flickers with lamplight, and within it, a scene both luxurious and slightly absurd unfolds. A noblewoman reclines on a white couch, one bare foot resting on a velvet cushion. Her robe is open at the shoulders, revealing skin slick with perfumed oil. Around her stand 3 attendants, 2 men and a young girl, all focused on one task, making her smell right. You've stumbled into the world of scented slaves and human loofahs. For Rome's elite, personal hygiene was never truly personal. It was delegated. Outsourced. Slaves weren't just servants, they were tools of cleanliness. The woman in the courtyard doesn't lift a finger. One servant applies scented oil to her arms. Another brushes it in with soft bristles. The girl kneels to rub pumice on her feet. You can't help but notice that each move is rehearsed, like a slow, oily ballet. Some of these slaves were trained specifically in scent layering, a skill that involved mixing oils based on the time of day, weather, mood, or upcoming guests. Clove in the morning, myrrh before sleep. A dash of nard if someone was coming over. You know, the essentials. Historians still argue whether this level of perfumed protocol came from genuine olfactory appreciation or was just another way to display power. Probably both. The more subtle your fragrance, the more powerful your message. I am so rich, I smell like nothing, on purpose. You watch one of the servants reach for a curious item, a soft sponge bound with linen, soaked in something cloudy. He uses it to wipe down the back of her neck, then himself wipes his own hands with a second cloth, also scented. Not for hygiene. For show. A performance of refinement. The Romans had a word for this, munditia, not just cleanliness, but elegance in cleanliness. It was a virtue, especially among the upper class. Looking clean wasn't enough. You had to embody it. That meant being scrubbed, powdered, oiled, and perfumed by someone else's hands. And then there were the human loofahs. No, seriously. Some slaves were expected to use their own bodies, hair, cloth-wrapped hands, or calloused palms, to scrub down their masters. There are records of preferred scrubbing techniques, of slaves with the right coarseness to clean the skin without scratching it. Imagine being valued for your elbows. Ah, Brutus, your servant's kneecap has the perfect texture. I must borrow him for my next exfoliation. You wince. And yet, it was common. Wealthy households often maintained small armies of grooming slaves, one for shaving, one for massaging, one for applying face powder, one for scenting clothes. You suspect they kept a detailed rotation chart somewhere, like a spa crossed with a military campaign. Not everyone approved. Stoic philosophers like Seneca mocked this obsession with appearances. He who must be scrubbed by 10 hands is unworthy of his own. But Seneca also had servants, so, fringe thinkers proposed stranger rituals. One Roman mystic claimed that rubbing one's feet with oil pressed by virgins under moonlight could cure melancholy. Another believed that being cleaned by a child under 7 restored the soul's innocence. You glance at the young girl by the noblewoman's foot and shudder. Probably best that one didn't catch on. The noblewoman now lies still, fully glazed like a roast goose. Her skin shimmers under the torchlight, and when she stands, she smells like a spice market during a thunderstorm. One servant follows, fanning her gently. Another walks ahead, scattering rose petals to freshen the path. You're not sure whether to applaud or worry. And just when you think it couldn't get more extravagant, you hear a soft clanking. A boy arrives with a tray of tiny clay pots, each containing a different underarm powder. She sniffs one and waves it away. The second she considers. The third she accepts. The boy bows as if he's delivered a crown. You sit back, your legs stretched on a cool marble edge. The woman and her scented cloud disappear down the hall, a procession of elegance, oil, and exhausted slaves. And you? You smell like warmstone in Trey's bathhouse water. But you're okay with that. No perfumed entourage needed. Still, you can't help but think about the paradox. Cleanliness, achieved not through solitude, but through the touch of many. A body polished by bodies. A luxury you're both envious of and deeply unsettled by. The night settles in again, thick with the scent of cedar oil on old stone. You wander deeper into the inner districts, where stone streets give way to polished colonnades and the buildings grow quieter, grander, more private. The air is thicker here, not just from humidity, but from perfume. It clings to your nose like invisible silk, floral, earthy, and a little metallic. The scent of wealth, of effort, of armpits trying desperately not to betray their owners. Rome had no deodorant as we know it, but oh, they tried. Tried hard. And sometimes dangerously. You follow the smell through a courtyard draped in ivy. Inside, a well-dressed man leans over a bronze mirror, dabbing something onto his underarms with 2 fingers. His robe is folded neatly around his waist. His other hand holds a small pot. You move closer and catch a whiff. Lavender, myrrh, and lead. Yes, lead. Romans, in their pursuit of perfection, loved white things, white skin, white teeth, white robes. So naturally, they turned to substances that whitened. Lead-based cosmetics were common, and unfortunately, so were lead-based deodorants. Paste made from cerussa, a white lead compound, was mixed with oils or vinegar and applied to pits, feet, even the folds of the neck. A soft layer of anti-smell elegance, and a slow-acting poison. Historians still argue whether Romans understood the toxicity. Some believe they thought the dangers were exaggerated. Others say they noticed the symptoms but blamed demons or bad air. Whatever the case, high society glowed, and sometimes died, trying to stay fresh. You sit quietly beside a fountain and watch 2 women pass, wrapped in silk stolas, both with tiny metal flasks dangling from chains around their necks. Not jewelry, perfume holders. The Roman version of a purse spray. They walk gracefully, but their pace quickens as a group of laborers passes on the other side of the square. The divide between classes was never just visible. It was olfactory. The poor smelled like the street, sweat, smoke, fish, leather. The rich smelled like imported flowers and cedar oil, layered to cover any hint of human biology. You couldn't always see wealth, but you could smell it. Of course, not everyone had access to lead-based paste. More practical folk used alum, a natural mineral salt still used in some parts of the world today. Crushed and moistened, it worked as a mild antiseptic and deodorizer. Far less glamorous, but also less likely to ruin your nervous system. Other common odor fighters included frankincense resin, vinegar baths, and frequent dusting with chalk or ash. A particularly popular blend, known as pulvis odoratus, mixed crushed iris petals with powdered bark and a little wine. Applied under the arms or between toes, it gave off a faint woodsy scent that lingered even through a hot forum debate. But sometimes, even that wasn't enough. Enter the emergency fix, scented scarves. Romans, especially women, carried finely embroidered cloths soaked in strong perfume. These weren't for themselves. They were to wave subtly under their noses when encountering someone with less refined habits. The message? I care about my dignity, even if you don't. You catch sight of one now, an elderly senator's wife, fluttering her scarf like a quiet rebellion as she sits beside a merchant with garlic on his breath. Her face doesn't move. Her eyes are blank, but the scarf twitches every 10 seconds, like a metronome of judgment. There's even a fringe theory that some women used small pouches of crushed rose petals sewn into their clothing to ward off both spirits and scent. The boundary between superstition and personal hygiene was blurred, especially when you're surrounded by temples, open sewers, and sun-baked humanity. The set rituals could be intense. Some perfumers made exclusive blends for individual clients, one for court appearances, another for funerals. Imagine selecting your grief scent. And the ingredients? Nothing was off-limits. Musk from animals, resins from distant lands, even the crushed shells of certain beetles. If it smelled good, or at least strong, it was fair game. You hear a whisper near the fountain. A man telling his companion that he suspects his neighbor's perfume contains opium. Not for effect, just to numb his own nose. You wonder if it's true. And then you remember, this is Rome. Of course it might be true. You linger in this scented square, where elegance masks everything underneath, where deodorant is poison, and perfume is armor. You wonder who actually feels clean, and who's just hoping they don't get caught reeking like real life. Then a breeze carries a trace of something nice. Lemon balm? No, probably citron oil. Imported. Expensive. Lovely. And beneath it, a hint of sweat. Always. You drift away from the perfumed elegance of the upper quarters, following your nose more than your feet now. The air thickens as you descend through narrower alleyways, where stone steps glisten slightly with condensation and the oil lamps seem fewer, dimmer. Here, behind the glamour of scented senators and exfoliated nobility, lies the hard-working world of Roman laundries, and their most famous secret ingredient, urine. You find yourself outside of Falonica, one of Rome's ancient laundry houses. The entrance is wide open, and you hear voices, low, tired, splashing. Inside, a row of stone basins stretches across the floor, each filled with cloudy, yellowish liquid. That's not a reflection. That's human pee. You step in. The smell hits you like a damp curtain. Acrid, earthy, deeply human. But the workers, mostly slaves and freedmen, don't flinch. They wade barefoot into the basins, stomping the laundry like grapes, kneading and squishing the garments in the chemical-rich pools. Ammonia from urine acts as a natural cleanser, breaking down dirt, grease, and even blood. Yes, that's right, urine was Rome's dry cleaning fluid. You watch a man lift a tunic out of the liquid, wring it tight between two muscular fists, then plunge it back down. He's humming something tuneless. Another worker scrapes cloth against a stone slab, murmuring a prayer to Fortuna, the goddess of luck. And luck would be nice, considering where his feet are soaking. Nearby, a boy stirs a vat with a wooden paddle. It looks like soup. It is not soup. He's blending a special whitening mix, urine, chalk dust, and fuller's earth, a type of clay. This concoction was reserved for togas, especially those worn by magistrates or at weddings. The whiter the toga, the higher your social shine. Yellowing garments were a public embarrassment. And in Rome, shame smelled like sweat and shortcuts. Historians still argue whether laundering with urine began as a necessity or as an intentional discovery. Was it chance, someone noticing how ammonia could lift a wine stain? Or was it trial and error, born of a culture that turned even bodily waste into industry? Either way, it was big business. There were Philonici in every major Roman city. They often operated under official permits and were subject to taxes. Yes, that same Vespasian urine tax again. His famous line Pecinia non olet, money doesn't stink, came from this exact context. He said it while holding up a coin to his son, who had questioned the morality of taxing pee. You glance over at a barrel near the door marked Ex Hibernia, from Ireland. Imported urine. Roman laundries didn't just collect local offerings, they imported pee from across the empire. If that doesn't impress you, nothing will. Further inside, you find a strange alcove, an area set aside for refinements. This is where clothes were brushed with pungent oils, sometimes even laced with perfumes, to mask the process they'd just undergone. But not too much. Rome respected authenticity. A man who smelled too floral might be accused of pretension. Or worse, Greekness. You spot an older worker meticulously folding tunics, his hands darkened by years of soaking and pressing. He looks up and offers a tired nod, then places a stone weight atop the pile to keep it flat overnight. This is a man who has literally stomped the dignity back into thousands of garments. Outside, a delivery boy loads baskets of clean laundry onto a mule cart. He adjusts a scroll tied with twine, the invoice, listing the clients, a senator's household, a brothel in Trastevere, a merchant's son. Everyone needs clean clothes, whether for court or conquest. And everyone, in the end, benefits from pee. And here's the twist, this wasn't considered lowly. The full ones, those who worked in laundries, were respected tradesmen, even if they smelled like fermentation. Some rose to wealth. One had his own funerary monument praising his skillful hands and blessed vats. It's one of the few professions immortalized in stone with feet still wet. You lean against the warm wall outside, your back resting on sun-baked brick. You can still smell the ammonia clinging to your cloak. But there's something admirable here. The ingenuity. The lack of waste. The audacity to say, we will clean your finest robe with the worst part of ourselves, and do it better than anyone else. And if anyone laughs at that, they probably have a stain on their toga. The farther you drift from the Thessalonica, the quieter Rome becomes. The bustle of the baths, the gossip of the perfume courtyards, even the sloshing of urine-laden vats fades into a hush broken only by the occasional bark of a street dog or the rhythmic squeak of a cartwheel in the distance. The city's waking heart winds down, and your steps grow softer as you near one of the most private, and arguably most vulnerable, parts of Roman life, the bedroom. You slip into a modest domus, a typical Roman home. The atrium glows with the last light of an oil lamp. A narrow hallway leads to a cramped bedchamber where a low wooden frame holds a sagging mattress stuffed with straw, rags, and, if the smell is right, at least one unfortunate rodent. Welcome to bedtime in ancient Rome. You perch gently at the edge of the mattress, feeling the uneven lumps beneath the cloth. A nearby curtain flutters, revealing a basket in the corner. It's moving! No, not laundry. A rat, most likely. Or a very ambitious beetle. Roman bedrooms were rarely luxurious, especially for the lower classes. And with open walls, shared courtyards, and neighbors constantly around, privacy was more hope than reality. Worse still, the bedbugs, the fleas, the lice, and the occasional unwelcome guest that crawled in from the street and under your sheet. You brush your shoulder reflexively. Too late. You're imagining things now. To combat the nightly parade of pests, Romans developed a few rituals. One involved rubbing the bed frame with oil infused with rue or mint, both believed to repel insects. Others scattered crushed garlic or bay leaves near the legs of the bed. A few swore by placing amphora shards around the mattress to trap wandering demons. You're not sure what kind of demons, but if they wore 6 legs and carried typhus, maybe they weren't wrong. Historians still argue whether these practices were practical or purely symbolic. One scroll from Pompeii details a nightly ritual that includes lighting incense, chanting a protection verse, and tying a red thread around the bedpost. Was it about bugs, or bad dreams? You hear someone coughing in the next room. A dry, repetitive hack, probably dust. Or maybe the poor soul has been chewing on that pumice toothpaste mint combo again. One of Rome's lesser-known side effects, mouth abrasions and late-night regret. You lie back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling beams, your head propped on a pillow that smells faintly of must and camphor. Romans rarely had soft pillows, stuffing varied wildly depending on wealth. Feathers if you were rich, moss, straw, or shredded papyrus if you weren't. Occasionally, ceramic headrests were used to preserve hairdos. That's right. Sleep like a log to wake like a goddess. For nighttime light, there's a simple oil lamp nearby. You watch the flame flicker against the wall, casting shadows that dance in shapes that could either be romantic or ominous, depending on your mood. One shape does, in fact, resemble a bedbug on stilts. Some families shared beds, especially in smaller homes. Parents, children, and occasionally visiting cousins all bundled under thin wool blankets, hoping their combined body heat would make up for the lack of actual insulation. Which, naturally, helped the fleas feel very welcome. Fringe remedies for pests ranged from reasonable to ridiculous. One remedy advised capturing a live toad and placing it under the mattress to draw away the crawling ones. Another insisted that a piece of parchment inscribed with the name of a Greek god, buried under the bed, would banish all biting creatures. You wonder how many bites it took before someone gave up and switched to the toad. But it wasn't all horror. Some Romans found genuine comfort in their routines. A warm bath before bed. A few pages of poetry, read aloud. A sip of diluted wine. A whispered prayer to Somnus, the god of sleep, hoping he might shield their dreams from bad omens and parasitic bugs. A mother in the next room sings softly to a child. The melody is old, barely more than a hum, but it's soothing. The words are lost, but the meaning is clear. Sleep now, safely, quietly, for a new day comes soon. You listen, eyelids growing heavier. The mattress creaks as you shift, finding that one angle where the straw doesn't jab you in the ribs. The shadows sway on the ceiling. Outside, a dog barks again, followed by silence. And then, scritch. Just one. Soft. Somewhere near your feet. You choose not to investigate. Sleep is stronger now than curiosity. The silence of the Roman night thickens like warm wool, wrapping the city in a sleepy hush, interrupted only by a far-off donkey bray or the occasional clank of armor from a late-night patrol. You lie still in your straw-stuffed bed, eyes half closed, when a soft, persistent throb begins behind one of your teeth. Ah, the ancient Roman toothache. Welcome to your new nightmare. You sit up, grimacing. This pain is familiar to Romans across time, status, and sandal size. Cavities. Infected gums. Nerve pain. All of it unwelcome, and all of it badly misunderstood. The Romans, for all their architectural genius and marble mosaics, were still guessing when it came to dental agony. And unfortunately, some of those guesses involved curses, demons, and worms. Yes, tooth worms. This wasn't just folklore. It was a widely held belief, inherited from the Babylonians and eagerly accepted by Rome, that small, wriggling worms lived inside teeth and caused pain when they moved or bit. Some healers claimed they had seen these creatures wiggling in extracted teeth. Historians still argue whether this was just decay, or if someone actually mistook pulp tissue for a tiny monster and called it a day. To treat the worm, you didn't floss. You smoked it out. One method involved placing a mixture of henbane seeds and myrrh on a hot stone, then letting the smoke drift into the aching mouth through a hollow reed. The idea? The worm would be so irritated by the stench it would flee your gums. You imagine ancient dentists proudly declaring, "He's leaving," while their patient tried not to suffocate from smoke and shame. Another solution was to whisper spells directly into the tooth. Yes, talking to the worm. Persuading it to leave. One surviving chant translates roughly to, "Worm of night, gnaw no more, sleep beneath the olive door." A lullaby. For a parasite. You shake your head and wander toward a nearby healer's stall, just a peek. The tiny shop glows by lamplight, cluttered with powders, tiny jars, and an unfortunate number of pincers. On a shelf is a collection of teeth, real ones, strung like beads on a cord. Some are blackened, some cracked. One is gilded, because even back then, vanity had its sparkle. The shopkeeper, a sharp-eyed woman with ink-stained fingers, is preparing a paste. Crushed poppy seeds, sage, and vinegar. Pain relief, allegedly. She also sells tiny charms to tie around her neck, silver coins engraved with protective symbols, amber beads, even miniature figurines of Asclepius, the god of healing. Whether they helped or not, well, they didn't bite like the toothworm. There were herbal poultices too. Crushed garlic with olive oil. Mint leaves soaked in wine. One scroll recommends soaking a frog in vinegar, then dabbing the affected cheek with its leg. No mention of what to do with the rest of the frog. For the desperate, and many there were curses. You pass a temple wall and notice something odd, a small lead tablet wedged between the stones. Someone has etched words in shaky Latin, addressed not to a deity, but to the pain itself. To the spirit in my jaw, I give thee sleep. Leave my flesh, dwell in stone. You wonder how many people made these offerings, whispering their suffering into metal and hoping the gods would notice. And then there's the theatrical side. Some believed toothaches were punishment for pride, gluttony, or ungratefulness. A man with a swollen face might be mocked as having argued with Jupiter and lost. Children were told that those who skipped their prayers would wake with a mouth full of thunder. Not all remedies were fanciful. Some Roman doctors, more informed ones, did attempt surgical treatment. Drilling, chiseling, even root removal. But again, with no anesthesia, no antiseptic, and a healthy dose of guesswork. Most patients chose the smoke and spells instead. Honestly, you might too. You wander back to your bed, cheek tingling just from the thought. You lie down gently, trying to ignore the memory of the tooth string necklace or the whiff of burnt henbane. Above your head, someone's carved a line into the wall, bite not into figs when the moon is fat. Ancient wisdom, or just bad fig handling? Hard to say. Your mouth settles. For now. You close your eyes once more, grateful for the reprieve, whispering a little chant, not because you believe in worms, but just in case. Peace to the tooth, hush to the jaw. May the night be soft and your dreams not gnaw. The wind picks up faintly as you drift into another Roman street, cool, whispering between brick walls and over terracotta rooftops, carrying with it the faint scent of roasted chestnuts and just a trace of decay. You follow your nose past quiet villas and shuttered shops until you find yourself before a domus with columns of polished marble and a doorway flanked by carved lions. This is no ordinary home. It belongs to someone powerful, an elite, maybe even imperial. A senator, a general, or, if the rumors are true, an emperor's cousin twice removed who still insists on being called Dominus by every passing fruit seller. You step inside the atrium and your eyes immediately drawn not to the opulence, but to the man reclining on a cushioned bench, jaw slack, lips parted just enough to reveal, well, that's a lot of gold. Welcome to the rare and expensive world of Roman elite dental work. His smile flashes oddly in the lamplight. Not white, not yellow, but golden, tiny caps or bridges gleaming where natural teeth once stood. While full dentures weren't common or especially effective in ancient Rome, partial replacements using gold wires, bone, or even animal teeth were not unheard of among the upper crust. One preserved skull from the period even shows signs of a dental bridge crafted from iron wire holding replacement teeth in place, a crude, but determined attempt at restoring a dignified grin. Historians still argue whether this was functional or merely aesthetic. Did they chew with it? Or just smile with it? The man turns his head, sips wine, and grins again. You try not to imagine what happens when someone bites too hard on a date pit. Nearby, a servant polishes a set of instruments laid out on a linen cloth. A bronze spatula, a thin hook, a pair of bone-handled tweezers. These weren't the tools of common barbers. These belonged to a private household medicus. Yes, the rich had their own dentists, or at least, their own pain managers. You watch as a second servant approaches with a small wooden box and opens it reverently. Inside, padded with wool, is what looks like a partial denture, possibly ivory, possibly carved bone, maybe even a reshaped boar tusk. And yes, it smells faintly of rose oil. Because when you put something in your mouth that once belonged to an animal, you send it first. There's a scroll tucked beside the box, handwritten in flowing Latin script. It appears to be a set of instructions for the fitting of the noble incisor, including notes on applying softened beeswax as a temporary adhesive. One line reads, "The tooth must sit with pride, neither tilted nor sunken, for shame follows the crooked." Of course, not all elite mouths aged gracefully. In fact, the sugar in imported wine, the honey in sauces, and the sheer frequency of feasts often led to faster decay among the upper class. Poorer Romans may not have had gold teeth, but they also weren't eating candied figs dipped in balsam 4 times a week. You pace through a study lined with statues and scrolls, where busts of ancestors scowl from polished niches. One figure's mouth is slightly open, revealing sculpted teeth that gleam unnaturally white. Perhaps the artist got carried away. Or perhaps, even in death, this family wanted to project perfect dental hygiene. In another chamber, you pass a mirror where a woman sits applying pigment to her lips. Not red, more of a pale berry stain, made from crushed mulberries and vinegar. She dabs at her teeth, too, using a soft cloth soaked in rosewater and alum. She smiles experimentally, tilts her head, checks again. You realize she's prepping for a dinner party where her smile may be judged more than her conversation. A young boy scampers past, and his tutor grabs him gently by the chin. He examines the child's teeth like a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. "Too dark," he mutters. "Send for the clove rub." Status began young. One elite woman was said to keep a personal slave whose only job was to maintain her tooth polish schedule, alternating vinegar days with pumice days. Talk about job specialization. Fringe remedies among the rich were often more elaborate than those of the poor. Chewing on pearls soaked in goat's milk, gargling with saffron tea and bits of silver leaf. One bizarre formula called for brushing with ash made from charred peacock feathers mixed with mint and mare's milk. You pause at a shelf filled with small flasks. One label catches your eye, Dendy's Regina, the Queen's Tooth. The perfume of nobility? Or just a very ambitious mouthwash? Either way, it smells better than some of the options you've met on this journey. The elite did what the elite always do, mask, preserve, and elevate the mundane to ritual. Their mouths, their smiles, their breath, it was all part of their brand. And yet, behind all the glamour, you know what lies beneath. Cracks. Rot. Maybe even a worm or two. Because no matter how golden the tooth, the pain still comes. You step back into the night air, one last glance over your shoulder as the nobleman chuckles at a joke only he found funny. His teeth flash again, bright, artificial, triumphant. And somewhere deep in your own jaw, a molar winces. The moon hovers high now, cool and round like a silent witness over tiled rooftops and shadowed courtyards. You drift through a narrow passage perfumed with rose petals and the lingering echo of whispered promises. The air here feels charged. Not political. Not spiritual. Something more intimate. You're walking into the realm where hygiene and affection met head-on, sometimes passionately, sometimes disastrously. Welcome to the strange and steamy world of Roman romance, and what they were willing to do to make their mouths more kissable. You arrive at a modest villa nestled behind a screen of laurel trees. The soft thump of music pulses through the walls, lyres and muffled tambourines. You peek through an open window into a candlelit chamber where a woman lounges beside a jar of red wine, her fingers dipping into a small clay pot. She lifts them to her lips, applying a mixture with care. It glistens faintly. Not lip gloss. Not balm. Something a little more intense. That, dream traveler, is a homemade love potion. Well, that's what she believes. A blend of myrrh, honey, and something that might have once been crocodile bile. Yes, crocodile. Because ancient Roman aphrodisiacs were equal parts myth, hope, and terrifying biology. She rubs the mixture gently along her gums, muttering a line from a poem, something about Venus's kiss and fruit ripening in spring. Whether it works is debatable. Whether it's safe is not. It isn't. Many of Rome's so-called love aids were worn, swallowed, or applied directly to the mouth. Some promised fresher breath. Others claimed to increase one's sweetness in the eyes, or nose, of a lover. And still others? Let's just say the side effects were never listed. You duck into a nearby apothecary's stall still lit despite the hour. Inside, jars line the wall with handwritten labels: Lingua lucida, Venus touch, Sapo cupido. The ingredients? A glorious mess. Dried petals, goat fat, cinnamon oil, musk scraped from deer glands, powdered oyster shell, and yes, lead. Always with the lead. Historians still argue whether these formulas were meant to appeal to the senses or simply to mystify the user into confidence. After all, a kiss is 90% commitment. And if you believed you were irresistible, maybe you became so. But belief doesn't stop infection. And that brings us to the other half of this story. You make your way to another room in the villa, a quieter, shadier space where a woman lies under a blanket, gently moaning. A slave at her side applies a cloth to her mouth. Her lips are cracked, swollen, and edged with sores. This wasn't uncommon. Some of those passion-enhancing pastes were riddled with irritants, lead oxide, raw sulfur, even mercury in rare cases. Overuse could cause what Romans called labia ignita, burning lips. Not metaphorically. Literally. There are even medical scrolls describing melting gums and lip rot following a particularly popular paste called Kersumlux, which promised divine kisses and delivered hospital visits instead. And still, they kept using them. Some lovers chewed perfumed herbs before bed, hoping to scent their breath and lips with romantic flair. Others rubbed cloves between their fingers and touched their mouths just before entering a banquet. Timing was everything. One especially bizarre remedy called for brushing the teeth with crushed rose thorns and goat milk for mouth tenderness. You wrinkle your nose. The scent of moldy wine and old incense lingers in the villa. Someone nearby is grinding cinnamon into powder, probably for another potion. Perhaps this one will be safer. Perhaps not. You exit quietly and find yourself outside another doorway, where graffiti scrawled in charcoal reads, "She kissed me, and my gums bled joy." Poetic. Also possibly a sign of gingivitis. There was love here, to be sure, but also longing, insecurity, and a desperation for magic in a world with little certainty. If your breath failed you, your kiss failed you. If your mouth soured, so did your fate. That was the belief, at least. So people risked it. For passion. For power. For the hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight would end with a whispered vow and not a dry cough. And if it didn't, there were always more jars. More powders. More promises. You sit now on a cool stone ledge beneath a fig tree, watching the glow from the villa flicker and dim. Somewhere, two lovers are kissing, their mouths dusted with danger and cinnamon. Somewhere else, someone's waking up to a painful pucker and wondering if Sapo Cupido was ever worth it. You lean back, lips dry but intact, and exhale into the Roman night. Sometimes love stinks. Sometimes, it stings. But in ancient Rome, it usually did both. You rise from your perch beneath the fig tree and stroll once more into Rome's sleeping arteries. The stars blink overhead, unbothered by mortals and their minty ointments, their scorched lips, their whispered spells. Tonight has shown you the rituals of the elite, the desperation of the lovesick, the horrors of hygiene disguised as affection, But what about the ordinary Roman with an aching molar and no household medicus? Enter the street dentist, or, more accurately, the roaming practitioner of mystery, miracle, and mild to moderate oral trauma. You follow the flicker of a solitary torch to a small square nestled between shuttered taverns. There, under a sagging canopy, a man in a patched tunic presides over a wooden box set atop two crates. His clinic. A faded placard dangles from one of the crates, scrawled in looping Latin, Dentarius Maximus, pains relieved, secrets removed, smiles restored. You step closer and study his tools. A wooden mallet. A curved iron hook. A bowl of salt water and something that might once have been wine. There's also a strange bronze horn, an early attempt at mouth illumination. Its wide end fits over the patient's lips, the narrow end concentrates light. If the patient didn't panic from the appearance alone, they might survive the procedure. A man sits down before him, red-faced and clearly in pain. He gestures toward his jaw. The dentarius nods gravely, as if diagnosing a royal. With zero hesitation, he reaches for the hook. These practitioners weren't doctors. Not really. They were part barber, part peddler, part performance artists. Some were veterans who'd picked up a few tricks from military camps. Others were complete frauds who had learned one truth: people in pain will pay anyone with pliers. Still, some were genuinely skilled. One street dentist in Ostia was so beloved he received a mural in the local bathhouse. It showed him smiling with all his own teeth intact, surely the best endorsement. Historians still argue whether these street dentists were dangerous charlatans or the only accessible healthcare for the lower classes. Probably both. Many Romans couldn't afford a proper medicus, and temples were more focused on metaphysical healing than molar extraction. So, people turned to these men and their traveling boxes. Sometimes, they got relief. Sometimes, they got infections. Sometimes, they got stories. You sit near the edge of the square, watching as the dentarius secures the patient's head between his knees. The tooth is visible now, blackened, swollen at the root. With a twist of the hook and a grunt of effort, the dentist pulls. The man lets out a strangled shout. Something wet hits the ground. The onlookers murmur. The dentist lifts the tooth into the air like a trophy. The patient sways, dazed, possibly grateful. A coin changes hands. A cloth is pressed to the wound. Next. But it wasn't just extractions. Some street dentists offered herbal remedies, pastes made from crushed fennel, garlic, or mint. One promised that rubbing burnt goat horn on your gums would cure any inflammation. Another sold charms to wear around the neck, small teeth wrapped in copper wire, said to ward off chewing demons. There were traveling women too, less common, but respected in some towns. They specialized in children's teeth, using gentle songs and smooth sticks to coax out baby teeth before the spirits could take them. One even claimed she could invite the tooth to leave peacefully by placing honey on the child's tongue and whispering to the sky. You wander through a narrow lane now, past doors painted with signs, Salve et Risus, health and smile. Another simply says no more pain. Their promises were sometimes desperate, sometimes earnest. But pain brings faith, and when your face feels like it's full of fire, you don't wait for credentials. At the edge of the forum, you pass a man rubbing his jaw and muttering to himself. He stops before a small shrine, drops a copper coin into the offering bowl, and leans close to a worn stone statue of a bearded man with half a smile carved into his face. Is it a god? A dentist? Or both? You never find out. The city sleeps heavier now. The dentarius has packed his tools. The torch has burned low. The patient has gone home, one tooth lighter, and hopefully, one burden less. You breathe deep and feel, in your own jaw, the ghost of someone else's pain. The city slumbers. From the villas on the Palatine Hill to the packed insulae of the Subura, Rome lies in a deep breath between midnight and dawn. But beneath your feet, below the stone paths and buried aqueducts, beneath the bathhouses and marketplaces, there's a place where the real remnants of Roman hygiene still linger, fossilized and forgotten. Welcome to the sewers. You're standing now at the entrance of a narrow tunnel half hidden behind a broken column. It yawns dark and damp, carved into the earth centuries ago as part of Rome's engineering marvel, the Cloaca Maxima, one of the oldest sewer systems in the world. And while the original function was simple, drain the city, today, it serves another unexpected purpose. Archaeologists go into Roman sewers not to unclog them, but to read them. Every clump, smear, and fossilized dollop of ancient waste tells a story. Because when it comes to hygiene, digestion, and health, the human body always leaves breadcrumbs, sometimes literal ones. You duck slightly and step into the tunnel. The walls are slick with time, the air thick with mineralized moisture and the faint echo of dripping. Your torch flickers as it catches the glint of calcified filth, and there, embedded in the floor, you spot a partially fossilized tooth. Someone lost it, flushed it, or maybe had it knocked out during a drunken tavern brawl. Now it waits quietly, offering clues. Nearby, a pile of ancient detritus holds fragments of date pits, olive stones, fish bones, and, unmistakably, parasite eggs. Historians still argue whether these remains prove that Roman sanitation worked or merely masked an empire-wide intestinal crisis. One parasite found in multiple sites? Trichuris trichura, whipworm. Unpleasant, persistent, unseen by the Romans, but all too familiar to modern researchers. You crouch lower, brushing aside dirt to find charred fennel seeds, an ancient digestive aid. Maybe someone was trying to ease their bloated belly. Or maybe they were just seasoning a stolen sausage. It's hard to tell. And then you find the true treasure, a coprolite. A fossilized poop. Reverently encased in soil like a relic, it holds secrets no scroll ever recorded. Seeds, hair, traces of medicinal herbs, and even grit, likely from eating off stone plates or grinding flour with imperfect mills. One sample pulled from a sewer near the forum contained fragments of oyster shell, suggesting someone had a luxury meal, followed by a hasty regret. These remains offer more than culinary clues. They reveal how often people got sick, what they feared, how they treated ailments. Some coprolites contain remnants of charcoal or ash, suggesting early detox rituals. Others include bits of mint and rue, plants used to freshen breath and soothe indigestion. One especially telling sample had clear traces of lead, probably from pipes, pots, or those infamous dental pastes. You move deeper, ducking under a low arch where rats once scurried and waste flowed freely. The silence here is dense. Your torch dances on the wall, where someone, centuries ago, scratched a crude figure into the stone. A man holding his stomach. Above him, 3 dots and a line. A warning? A joke? An ancient emoji? You chuckle quietly and step past a collection of pottery shards. Some are marked with names, curses, or what may be shopping lists. One reads, Brutus owes me vinegar and figs. Another, beware the stew from stall 4. Rome, even in its bowels, was chatty. But it wasn't all decay. The sewer preserves what the city tried to forget, refuse, yes, but also resilience. In the filth, you see how ordinary people lived. How they ate, how they struggled with illness, how they scavenged and adapted. One broken comb. One chewed bone. One molar with a copper cap. They all whisper the same thing, we tried. As you near the exit, you glance up at a beam of light spilling through a grate high above. Footsteps echo distantly overhead. Rome continues, unaware of the stories pulsing beneath its sandals. You exhale and step back into the night, brushing dust from your cloak. The stars above feel brighter now. You've just walked through a chapter of history most people would rather skip, but it may be the most honest one yet. Because the truth of Roman hygiene isn't just in the baths or the perfumes or the gold-tipped dental tools. It's here! In what they left behind. You emerge from the underbelly of Rome as the horizon begins its slow transition from obsidian to iron gray. Dawn is still distant, but the city is shifting. A cart rolls lazily past, its wheels creaking like tired bones. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster stretches its neck and regrets it. You feel the city inhaling again, one breath closer to waking. Your journey isn't over quite yet, not until you reckon with the ultimate question, how clean was Rome, really? You stroll now through a quiet street lined with fountains, statues, and shadows. A woman with a broom sweeps dust from her shop's threshold. A temple priest rinses his hands in a marble basin. Life, messy as ever, resumes. Ancient Rome prided itself on order. Its aqueducts brought fresh water to millions. Its sewers carried waste away from homes, forums, and bathhouses. Its streets, even the less glamorous ones, had drainage systems. Public fountains gushed day and night. In theory, Rome should have been spotless. And yet, you pass a corner where the walls are darkened by centuries of soot and human stain. You recognize the spot. It's been used as a urinal since before Caesar was born. The stone is etched with a quiet protest, Stop peeing here. It smells. Archaeologists have uncovered layers upon layers of refuse in even the grandest villas, fish bones under mosaic floors, rodent nests behind marble panels, bits of broken chamber pots stashed in wall cavities. One excavation found the remains of a pet dog curled beside a long-dead rat, both preserved in the ash of Vesuvius. Nature and waste always win in the end. Historians still argue about Rome's overall cleanliness. Some claim it was the most hygienic ancient city the world had seen, revolutionary in its plumbing, its public baths, its civic pride. Others paint it as a stinking, overcrowded, pest-ridden metropolis that hid its crime behind marble facades. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. Yes, the elite lived with scented oils, private baths, and attendants to scrape their armpits. But the poor slept in stairwells above public toilets and bathed in streams they shared with laundry slaves. For every home with a latrine, another 10 relied on chamber pots dumped into the street at sunrise. For every aqueduct-fed fountain, there was a cistern gone foul in summer heat. You pause at a crossroads where two water channels meet. One trickles clean, one is sluggish and dark. A perfect metaphor. Cleanliness in Rome wasn't a constant. It was a pursuit, a performance, a daily negotiation with dirt, disease, and dignity. People rinsed, scraped, scented, and swallowed whatever it took to feel fresh, or at least appear that way. You pass a young man rubbing mint leaves on his neck. An older woman pours wine over her hands after preparing fish. A child spits toothpaste made of ash and salt into the gutter. These are people living in filth. These are people fighting it. And when you think about it, isn't that what hygiene still is? Not perfection, but persistence. In a city of marble gods and golden smiles, sometimes the most heroic thing was just scrubbing your teeth with mouse skulls and pretending you didn't notice the rats under the bed. You find a bench near a small fountain, its basin carved with sea creatures and dolphins. You sit, letting the cool spray mist your face, and exhale. Rome wasn't clean, but it tried. And in the trying, it became something glorious. Something human. Now, let your shoulders soften. Let the last murmur of Rome settle into silence. The fountains hush. The footsteps fade. Even the torchlight behind your eyes begins to dim. You've walked through the unpolished truth of a civilization often frozen in marble. You've seen its strange potions, its painful tools, its elegant filth. And through it all, you've glimpsed something timeless, the human desire to care, to cleanse, to connect. Let your mind drift, gently now. Picture those quiet Roman bedrooms with walls painted in reds and ochres. Picture the baths cooling under moonlight. Picture the hum of a city that never fully slept but knew how to dream. Feel your breath slow, each inhale soft as a whisper. Let go of the pumice, the vinegar, the powdered peacock feather. Leave it all behind, like a used tersorium set carefully back in the trough. There's no judgment here. Only the shared understanding that we've always done what we could, scrubbing, rinsing, laughing at ourselves, hoping we might face the world tomorrow just a little brighter, a little cleaner. Sleep now, gently, in the shadow of 7 hills and 1,000 years of stories. You are safe. You are still. You are clean enough.